So for this painting, paint brushes that I'll be using were large round brush and a medium flat brush, both for larger areas, covering larger areas. And we have a medium sized round brush, two of them, which I'll be using to give out outlining or detailing. Then the smaller size flat brush for giving the reflection. We can use the detail brushes to give reflection as well as highlights on the bark and the highlights on the rocks and the shore. Then the paints that we'll be using are Cobalt Blue, the Yellow Deep, and the Brilliant Red for the basic primary colors. Then we have the Sap Green and the Burnt Umber. Along with that, we'll be using a black and a white. Then going for mixing, we're using a paper palette. You can use a plastic or a paper plate as well as then a glass container with water for washing the brushes, and then waste cloth to wipe the brushes once they are done so that you can reload the paint on it, and also a reference image as a starter. So these are the things that we will be using for this painting.
Now let's go to the main painting. You can see that I have placed a white. It can be either titanium white or any other white, and also cobalt blue or any blue that you have. Now I'm just wetting the paint brush so that we can load the paint onto the paintbrush bristles. Just wetting it again. Now I'm going to blend a bit of white and bit of cobalt blue and start with the first layer of the sky. Now I'm using a medium sized round brush and spreading the paint all over. I'm dipping my paintbrush in water because I'm feeling the paper absorb the paint too much, and also the paint was getting dry. So I'm mixing again, taking paint, loading the paint, mixing it on the paper palette, a little bit of cobalt blue and a lot more of white, whichever white you're using, and then continuing to paint only the top surface and wetting it whenever required. Now I will be checking out the reference painting, and wherever the blues are required I'm going to fill it in. On the sky I'm filling it in that particular area, and also in the reflection in the lake I'm filling the blues as the underlying layer. So this will be our first layer which we are putting onto which we will be building up details later on. Now I'm going to just divide the horizon, just making a mark with the brush, just to know where our composition is, and continuing to paint the reflection. Now I'm just filling in wherever I see that the blue is required, just checking out the reference and filling in the sides of the land area with the blues to build in the first layer. Now I have squeezed out a little bit of brilliant red, yellow and white, and I'm going to start painting the skies. So I'm taking a little bit of yellow, a very tiny amount of red and white, mix it together to get a peachy yellow, and then start to paint the sky. Once I find the correct shade, mix in a bit of more yellow to give the yellow brilliant sky, and dip the paintbrush in water to make the paint more fluid. And I'm using a medium sized flat brush here to cover more area, just dabbing it on the area, or you can just paint it through and through. Make sure to keep away from the blue, as you know, when blue and yellow mixes, a greenish tinge will come. So keep away from the blue. Then fill in all the white areas of the sky, and where we position the sun, you leave the bit of white around like in a circle, so that you can recreate the sun illusion. Now I'm going on for a larger round brush to cover more area, and I'm going to fill in the reflection or the lake with the yellow sky reflection, mixing a bit of water so that we can cover large area, keeping the shade same as before but more yellowish. Now I'm just going to fill the rest of the sky too with the yellows, where the trees are going to be, the background of the trees, just filling it out. Now we'll move on to add a bit of more color to the sky. I'm adding it a little bit more red to the yellow shade that we have created. This time I'm using a medium size round brush, a little bit more white to create that pinkish hue on the skies, and filling in the rest of the area with that particular shade. Now I'm using a wet large round brush to blend in, whereas I'm using the smaller round brush to add in the colors. Once again, I'm using the large round brush to blend in the colors laid by the smaller brush, and just go around and smoothen all the shades around. Now I'm going to give a little bit more definition for the sky, adding a little bit more red on the borders of where the blue and the yellow meets. Then I'm going to blend it with a large round brush and smoothen it out, followed by the white highlights of the clouds, so that it just blends in between the blues and the yellow. Now I'll add in a little bit more clouds on the blue sky, giving a bit of pinkish shade, followed by the white, and just dabbing a large round brush to give a cloud effect. Now we'll create a purplish violet hue onto the sky. So we'll mix a bit of red and blue and a bit of white to give that quite lavender shade, and just add in more white to soften the color. A little bit of water to smoothen it out. Now we'll apply it onto the sky. You can see how a light lavender shade can be created. Then I'm going to use a large round brush to blend in the shade onto the sky. Similarly, I will take a little bit of that shade again and do it on the other side, and then again blend it with a large round brush. We have now almost completed the first layer of the sky, and we'll move on to the reflection. So the same shade in the sky, we will have a reflection down below. So I'm just going to use a medium sized round brush and just create streaks and fill in the area. I'm switching to a smaller flat brush to create the streaks. Just pulling it along in a sideways direction with the same shade, adding in a little bit of white and then pulling it in a sideways direction. So especially near the horizon, we're going to recreate the distant trees. So just demarking that line. Now using the same shade, we will just pull the flat brush upward in the upward direction in a descending height to create a background or the first layer of our distant trees. So just adding a little bit of blue and a little bit of red to again create that purple shade, then add in our white, and then again start pulling it from the horizon line, pulling it upwards from the horizon line in a decreasing height towards the sun. This will be our first background layer. Now I'll add in a little bit more of color, that is, I'll add in a little bit more of red and a little bit more of blue and create a little bit more darker shade and define the whole area. We will add in more details later, but for now we will stick to this. Now I'll mix a bit of red and yellow and pull in a little bit more of orange streaks in the reflection. Once again, I'm switching to a flat brush and I'm filling in more areas of the lake and defining the reflections once again. Now moving on to the middle ground and the foreground, I'm going to use a thin detail brush, again going on mixing more of blues into the red to get a deep purple color. I'm using a thin detail brush to outline the borders of the horizon, wetting it with the water to make the paint flow a bit more and get a beautiful line. Similarly, I'm pulling it towards the other side and demarcating the line between the sky and the lake. Using the same deep purple color, I am creating reflection lines on the lake, reflections of the tree, pulling it along the waters. The same deep blue color, adding a little bit more blue and pulling the lines sideways. Now using the same deep purple color, we will highlight the trees in the middle ground. I'm using red, blue and a bit of white, and I'm just giving depth to the trees that we already outlined, just adding more of blue to give a more darker further away effect, just filling in the thickness of it and then giving a little bit of definition later on. Similarly on the other side, I'm building up the thickness of the trees and pulling it towards the side. Now to create more details on the top portion of the trees, we will use a medium-sized flat brush and pull it upwards along the thickness that we have built. So we'll keep on doing this through and through, dabbing the paintbrush in the top areas of the thickness that we have created to give the illusion of leaves and the trees standing out afar. Now I will add in a little bit more darker blue to create a little bit more of highlighting in the trees, to give a little depth. So we can build from either darker to lighter and create more depth by adding in more darker areas, or either ways. Just refining the top portion again with the flat brush. You can see how the foliage has come out very well. Now let's move on to the foreground. So I'm trying to create a brown shade here. I'm mixing a bit of green, a bit of blue and a bit of red to recreate the brown. You can either go ahead and use your browns, or you can try out this shade. Now using a thin detailed brush, I'm outlining the bark of the tree, pulling it downwards towards the land area, and just bringing out the composition of the picture. I'm dragging it downward as the tree bark reflection will continue into the leaf. So I'm pulling down one more tree bark, another one more again, just trying to outline where our trees are going to be, where our land area is going to be. So I'm just outlining those areas so that we can fill in the details later on. So using the detail brush, I'm continuing to build in the composition. Now I'm going to fill the land area with the greens and browns. So I'm using a medium brush here, and I am filling in the land area that we have outlined, filling in with green initially, and then I will then move on to fill in the areas with the browns that we have created. You can go ahead and use your own browns or darker browns or a little bit of black, but here I'm just playing around with colors to bring out the land area, or bring out the brilliance of the land area out, putting in some reds, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green to create a very bright brown. I'm keeping the land area quite dynamic, just filling in with the colors that are in and around the areas of my color mixing to give quite a depth in the painting. So you can see how I am playing around with different shades that is coming up in the palette. This creates quite a depth and quite a play of colors on the land, and makes the painting very dynamic and very vibrant. I have now squeezed out some burnt umber, and I'm playing around with that too. I'm filling it in the land area wherever there is more shadows. I'm giving it in those areas to create depth again. So you can see how the shadows create highlight in the land area, reflecting the sun's light, which we will be detailing later on. So the image is getting built up. You can see how I'm giving a bit of yellow to show the sun's reflection on the land, and creating a light and shadow effect there. Similarly, I'm filling in the other piece of land using burnt umber this time. You can see how different browns are being brought onto the paper when we are using the different shades. This all improves the vibrancy of the painting and creates depth. Now I'm moving on to the detailing of the tree. I'm using the same burnt umber to give more detail and highlight to the trees. So I'm working on with the bark first, the trunk of the tree, giving it a little more thicker build up when it comes towards the land. So you can see how the taper of the bark comes. I'm also defining the reflection as I build up the trees. So just continuing with it. Now I'm going to build up the branches of the tree. So very fine, I'm using a thin detail brush here to finely outline the branches of the tree, keeping it very thin and narrow, not thick. Just going to fill in all the branches now. Also just pull in some lines on the reflections to give the reflection of the tree effect. Now I will continue to bring in the forest effect that is happening in the foreground. I'm using the same browns to give a background there and then build up the leaves onto that, just to give the effect of foliage. I'm using changing on to a medium sized flat brush to fill in the foliage area, using a bit of browns to do this, also filling in the leaves onto the branches to give that effect. Now I'm going to use the greens with the medium sized flat brush, just dabbing onto the foliage area. Just keep on dabbing. This will recreate the leaf effect. You can also fill in the branches now. Just focus on the branches. Don't completely cover the tree. Just leave a little background areas too, and just continue filling the green foliage onto the tree branches. Now we'll continue doing the dabbing and fill in all the branches. Once you have filled in all the branches, we will move on to the next step of fine detailing the leaves. Now moving on to the foreground and the fine detailing, we are using a detail brush and then filling in on the branches with the same green, just filling in more of a deeper green to create the depth over the lighter shades that we have kept in before, adding a little bit of brown too to create the deep effect. Now I'm continuing to fill in the deeper green, Sap Green, with a medium sized flat brush, and continuing to fill in all the branches just like before, using the dabbing technique, but with a shade a little bit more deeper than the one that we used earlier. This creates a sense of depth and brings the leaves a bit forward, creating a dynamic and three-dimensional effect. Just filling it using the dabbing technique near all the branches. Now I'll continue the dabbing and also continue it onto the land area so that we have like a grass effect. I'll also take a little bit of the green and create a tinge of green shade onto the reflection, keeping the flat brush and pulling it sideways like we did the reflections before. Now I'm going to get back to my detailed brush and I'm going to use Sap Green and the dark brown shade that we have created, and I'm going to highlight the barks once again and also the branches so that they can be a little bit more visible and create a little bit more detail in the painting. I'll continue creating the same branches with a detailed brush with the same shade through and through and complete it. Now I'm using a little bit of black to give more definition and a sense of shadow on the bark. So repeating the same way, I used the detailed brush to highlight the branches and the bark. I'm once again doing it with the darker black shade so that there is more shadow effect and more depth in the painting. And I'll continue doing this for all the trees. Moving on to the land area, we're using the same black and creating a little bit of shadows here and there. I'm going to recreate a rock effect, so I'm putting in a little bit more black and a little bit more of a tinge of green, and building up the land area, giving more definition, blending it in. Now I'm just using a flat brush and just blending in all the highlights that we have created with the darker shade. Again, going on to the detail brush, creating some more of definition here and there, just pulling the brush over the land areas. I'm switching over to the detail brush, and once again creating a little bit more definition with the blacks, then pulling it over here and there over the land area, just dabbing or giving the pull strokes. I switch over to the flat brush to dab over and blend in all the highlights that we have created, just dabbing over it and pulling it softly. Now using the detail brush, once again I'm just going to define the borders of the land area to where the water meets the land. Just using the blacks, just highlighting the borders once again and creating a definition there, also a shadow near the area that meets the water. Now I'll continue with the pull strokes towards the side to create a reflection, just so that there's a highlight on the reflection, a little bit of shadow here and there, just pulling on with the detail brush. Now I'll just add a little bit more of barks in the forest foliage area to create a dense forest effect. Move on to the reflection again to build in more depth and create a definition in the reflection. So this is your final detailing stage. So at this stage you can just go through your painting and evaluate it, and wherever required you can build in the details, depth and shadow. Next I'm going on to the highlights with the white and a little bit of yellow, just pulling a small detail brush sideways so that the reflection of the sunlight can be brought onto the land area, just pulling it sideways and imagining rocks and imagining the shapes there on the land and how the light falls on it. I'm just pulling on the white. This creates a sense of depth again. Now I'm using a flat brush to blend in the highlights that we have created. I'm just pulling it sideways like before, just blending in again. Now the same highlight effect I'll do it on the barks using the white and a little of yellow, just spotting the barks with the white so that there's like a reflection effect on the bark too, to where the sunlight falls. Now I'll continue doing the same thing through and through with the bark. I will also do this onto the leaf soon. Once again, I'll just finish the land area also with the highlights. I'm moving on to a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, and creating a lighter shade. I'm just highlighting the leaves too to create a highlight effect. Just continuing to do it on the leaf area, on all the trees. Now I use a bit of white and just refine the sun area and define the borders and give it that circle effect. Just dab it and blending the white, creating the bright lustrous effect. Just pulling the whites and refining the reflection once again, just mimicking the sunlight falling on the lake, just pulling the thin detail brush sideways and creating a very lustrous and shiny effect onto the lake. I'll continue this into the lower part too, just pulling the small detail brush over the reflection with the white, just filling in and creating a sense of depth, a sense of light on the surface of the water. Now I'll just do some finishing touches, just putting a little bit more of white here and there to create a cohesive final look. Just pulling in on a little bit of white. At this stage you can analyze it and just add in wherever you require it, wherever you feel it right, and that creates a balance in your painting. I'll also just give a little bit of yellowish, so if it's too white, we can balance it with a bit of yellow and mix a bit of white, yellow, and smoothen it out. I'll continue with the final touches with a small detail brush. Just dab a little bit here, yellow here and there, so that there's like a cohesive effect again on the leaves, on the bark, on the land, everywhere, so that there's a unified final balanced painting in the end. Just pulling and dabbing a small detail brush with a little bit of yellow. Now for the last step, I'm going to use a little bit of white, and I'm just going to again move it throughout the painting wherever I feel it's required to highlight it, just so that I can get an overall balance in the painting. Just the final touch, we can say that. And once you feel like you have completed, or you feel a balance through and through your painting, you can stop the painting and view it from a distance. Always keep a painting from a little distance, hold it away, and see if there's an overall balance. If there's something missing, just keep on adding till you find the right balance. Okay, so I'm just doing the final touches and finishing it all off. Finally, it always comes down to a play of dark and light, so just interplay between the darker shades and the lighter shades and create that shadow light effects for the final step. And there you have it, your completed landscape painting.